then over to you, Joe.
Amazing. Thank you, Feridun, and everyone for joining me. I do realise that you've joined me at great sacrifice from some of the other incredible sessions that are going on right now. So thank you for coming along. Right, so consultants versus recruiters, collaboration, not confrontation.
Instead of getting a train, you got a...
Oh, hello.
Hello, someone's unmuted. So can I just ask?
I'll deal with that.
Okay, cool. Can I just ask, raise your hand using the raise hand function if you are here today as a recruiter. I can see Mulligan's hand. Does anyone know how to use the raise hand function? Well, I'm seeing Alex Phillips, John Stiles, James. Yep, you're all in the recruitment game. Anyone here not as a recruiter? There's me. Feridun. Rob's obligated to be here because he's a friend with me, but he's not a recruiter. Who else we got? Laura, hey, and Steve as well. Excellent. So we've got a bit of a balance. So just wanted to have a session today to focus on a bit of an odd thing in the industry that we all work in, which is this dynamic between recruiters and collaboration, and see how perhaps there's some things that we can learn about how we can more effectively work together. Okay. Now, first of all, I apologise. I'm going to do the boring bit about me. So who am I? Well, I am a Power Platform architect and technical consultant. Alison will probably tell me off and say that's a terrible job role and title. So she can fill you on that later. I've worked with Dynamics for about 10 years, so I've been contracting for 7 years. I'm a contractor. I'm also, for my sins, a Power Platform licensing consultant. For some reason, I find it enjoyable digging through the licensing guide. I am that strange. And as you're about to see, I am fairly fond of a meme, however you say it, as we go through this. Okay, so connect with me on socials. We'll put these back up at the end. I'm very active on Twitter, Dynamics, Stroke Football, if you're interested. All professional on LinkedIn, so connect with me on LinkedIn, and we'll do the QR code thing at the end. But if anyone, I think I'm connected with most of you anyway, but if you aren't connected with me, please do so. Okay, so I have a question for you. Contract people, non-recruiters, let's say, candidates. How would you describe recruiters? As a valuable resource? Is that how you view them? Or perhaps have you used the phrase necessary evil in the past? Or are they indeed a scourge on mankind? What would you say? Well, hopefully no one is saying that they are a scourge on mankind. But have you used the phrase necessary evil? I have in the past, because sometimes it feels that way, doesn't it? Why do we feel that way sometimes about recruiters? Well, in reality, it's because we all have horror stories, don't we? I was sent for an interview once, got all the way to London from Bristol to find out that there was no interview, that it had been not set up with the client and I'd just been led a merry dance. Perhaps recruiters, we feel, see us as a commodity, something that they're only really interested in if we can fulfill the need or the role that they're looking for. And the classic ghosting. Have you ever had the phone call? I'm so glad I've caught you. I know it's Friday afternoon, but I really need you to send me your CV because I've got the role. It's perfect for you. They want someone to start Monday. They need you to get in and on board. It's going to be amazing. The rate's fantastic. And then you never hear from that recruiter ever again. Well, I'm sure we've all experienced that. And all the recruiters right now are giving me digital evils from the participants list. But it's true. These are behaviours that many of us have seen. But let's just put a pin in that for a second and ask a different question. How do recruiters view you, me, candidates? Do you think they view us as a valuable resource? Perhaps a necessary evil, or indeed a scourge on mankind? Well, let's hope it's not the last one. But it is true that the views that we may have as candidates of recruiters, they can often have the same views of us. And why? Because funnily enough, they've got horror stories too. Speaking to some of my dear friends who are recruiters, they've found that they've talked to candidates, perhaps mentioned, I've got a great role for this organisation. Are you interested? Yeah, brilliant. Only to find out that the candidate has reached out on LinkedIn to someone from that organisation. Perhaps they've overstated their experience. Have you ever had a candidate come to you, recruiters, and say, I am an expert in F&O. Field service, I'm your person. And they've never delivered a single project on either. And perhaps another one, and I guess I've been guilty of this in the past, is not perhaps being open and giving an accurate picture of your situation. So are you interested in a role? Are you available for a role? And you say, yeah, I'm available, when actually you're waiting to hear if you're getting extended, or you're looking for a better rate from your current contract or employer. And then finally, ghosting. How many of us are guilty of doing exactly to recruiters what we can't stand it when they do to us? Never calling them back, treating them like the partner that you don't want to see anymore. Now, I'm sure all of us can agree that, well, they are the horror stories. We have plenty more. But there is an element of reality in some of those things. I'm sure some of us have experienced most of them. And I find this really puzzling, because the odd thing is that in that situation, nobody wins. The candidate doesn't get a role. The client doesn't get their needs fulfilled by their technical needs fulfilled, and the recruiter doesn't get any money because they haven't filled the role. So, in spite of everyone essentially working to the same aims, there is this combative dynamic or viewpoint between candidates and recruiters. Some of it driven by past experience, but some of it driven just by perhaps we don't know the reasons why. But ultimately, nobody wins, do they? So what is the key to changing this? Well, it is collaboration. What is collaboration? Well, if you look up the dictionary, it defines collaboration as two entities working together towards a common goal or purpose. So how can we say that's true when it comes to evil candidates and evil recruiters? How are we actually working to a common goal? Well, ultimately, if you're a candidate, what do you want? You want to pay your bills. You want to go on holiday. You want to get paid. And to do that, you need a job, be it a permanent position or a contract. That's your goal. If you're a contractor, what do you want? You want to get paid, pay your bills, go on holiday. And to do that, you have to earn commission. And to do that, you have to get your candidate into a job. So it's really bizarre, because actually candidates and recruiters have exactly the same aim, to put that candidate in a role. And actually, this change in mindset, if it comes about, can really help candidates work together. And that's the purpose of this session today. Now, rather than listen to me rattle on about it for goodness knows how long, what we've done is pre-recorded some sessions. So there's myself and Alison, the Abbott and Mulligan duo. It's starting to become a thing, Alison. It's catching on. Recorded a chat we had to talk about some of these issues. So we're just going to play that now. And it has to be said, we had to cut it down, because we went to record about 10 to 15 minutes and it ended up 45. So don't worry, I did cut it down. But for those of you who don't know Alison, she's the CEO of Maximus IT. She's worked in recruitment for 25 years, worked exclusively in the Dynamics space for, I believe, 10 years. What she doesn't know about Dynamics recruitment isn't really worth knowing. So let me share the session, and let's see if I can do this now. Will this work? Okay, bear with. Dun, dun, dun. Here we go. Someone wave at me if you can't see or hear this. Here we are with the wonderful Alison Mulligan in the emulation of the great Cilla Black, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you come from.
What's your name? My name's Alison. I am the CEO of Maximus IT. We are a dedicated Microsoft Dynamics and Power Platform recruitment company. And that's probably about it. I'm a business applications MVP. I should probably chuck that one in there, you know, like bragging rights and all that. And
in the background there, I like that.
And I'm also a D365 and Power Platform user, so I build stuff on our systems here for us to use as well. So I've got a little bit of tech knowledge.
Fantastic. How long have you been working in this sort of technology recruitment space?
Well, I've been working as a technical recruiter for all kinds of different things for nearly 25 years. I know I don't look old enough, so you don't have to say it.
Definitely.
But specifically, Maximus started working with Dynamics recruitment in 2011, but I then became a Dynamics user. I moved us onto a D365 CRM in 2015, including like an Azure backend and Office 365 and all that kind of thing. And that was the beginning. I initially got involved in a bit of Power BI stuff, which I was terrible at. I thought I would be much better. I wasn't. And I kind of got into it from there. And really, it was only since like 2019 until now that I've really got involved with recruiting more for that area. It was Dynamics before, but like really more of the Power Platform stuff. We kind of got into in like 2018, 2019. In fact, it was 2018. And the reason I remember that now is because at the end of 2018, I said, that's it, we're not going to do any of the other stuff that we recruit for now. We're just going to do Dynamics and Power Platform. And we had to lose some customers that we'd had for a long time and stuff like that, which was a little bit painful, but we wanted to focus. It's putting your money where your mouth is, right? If you believe in the technology, then... You know.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's placed you in an ideal position, really, to talk about some of the things we're talking about today around in the Dynamics Power Platform world, how recruiters and candidates, us, contractors, be it perms or contractors, I guess, how we can work together to collaborate more than this kind of confrontational suffering of each other that we've talked about, which I think is, you know, as we've said already, is part of a two-way thing. So I guess the first thing to ask then is, what are some of the behaviours that you've seen in the industry that don't exactly help the situation? What would you say?
Yeah, going back a step, it's actually the whole thing is a three-way thing, because there's candidate and recruiter, and then client and recruiter, and then client and candidate together. So that's why some of the things are a bit stickier than they really need to be. Yeah. And that's generally it's because there's an additional link in the chain that we get issues. And so, like, one of the typical things that I hear very often that recruiters are 100% guilty of, but maybe with some mitigation, is not giving candidates proper feedback as to why they weren't suitable for a role. And for me personally, I wouldn't let a client get away with not giving me decent feedback. You know, if somebody's taken the time out of their day to interview for a position, then the least they deserve in return is some proper, decent feedback as to why they weren't the person that was selected for the job. And I know you and I have spoken about this briefly before. Sometimes there's just so many people to choose from and everybody's great. They have to pick an arbitrary reason as to why they're going to reject a candidate, or why they're rejecting everybody else and picking one person over everybody else. And they may not have any useful feedback to give you, but that is in and of itself feedback. What I'm saying in a roundabout kind of way is, it's never always. So
I think that's good for us to hear, because you're our point of contact, and it is easy to kind of just take that assumption that it's almost, you can almost have this subconscious thing that it's you that's made the decision.
And that's what you want. Like, that's what you want from a recruiter, right? I think that in my mind is my image of what I think everybody wants from a recruiter. You want somebody that's going to go to bat for you, right? Somebody that's going to go to the client and put their best foot forward and put your best foot forward, because you can't do that yourself. because we're in the way, right? We're in the chain of communication. So I think it's right to expect that we have some involvement in decision making, but sometimes we just don't. I think the best thing you can do is to try and gauge whether or not you think that recruiter has your best interests at heart and whether they're going to bat for you, right? That's one thing that you can do, and that's pretty straightforward. If a recruiter's just asking you, can you do this, can you do that, how much do you want, when will you start, then they're not really right. Well, they'll probably still get you a job, in fairness, but but like, are they approaching it from a Joel, tell me about you, what works for you, what doesn't work for you kind of way? Sure. In which case, then maybe you get more of a sense that they actually care about you as a person.
No, that makes a lot of sense, actually. I think, though, there needs to be an awareness from candidates that there can be as much, let's call it, unhelpful behaviour from the candidate side as there can be from the recruiter side. So it works both ways, is what I'm trying to say. So what sort of things have you come across from candidates, not, that where it hasn't been helpful, or things that candidates should really try and avoid?
Yeah, so we've obviously spoken offline many times, and there's stuff that's come up in the course of conversations. One thing that's really not useful to us is if we don't have a full picture of what's going on with you. So there's been plenty of times when I've spoken to a candidate and I ask a question, what else have you got going on at the moment? Right? And because there is a perception that there's a lot of recruiters out there that are fishing for information, that you don't want to tell them. You don't want to give them the information about what else is going on. And I 100% understand that perspective. I understand why people feel that way, and I understand that it is a thing that happens and it is a problem. And I also understand that if you don't know me, you don't know that I'm not that person, right? So I would be interested in feedback about how I can convey that I'm not that person without saying, hey, I'm not that person. But if you don't tell me what else is going on, I'm going to go to bat for you. I'm going to get you an opportunity, and I'm going to go to that client and say, Joel is not talking to anybody else right now. You've got an opportunity to secure Joel before anybody else gets their hands on him, right? And then what's going to happen is I'm going to pull everything together, pull all of my resources together to get them to move their process forward to secure an offer for you. And then I'm going to go, right, let's set up a call for you to discuss this offer with the client. And then you go, oh, no, I've accepted another offer yesterday. You said you didn't have anything else in the process. Yeah, well, I did. So.
Anything else?
Yeah, and using that as an example as well is a great one, because there are some recruitment. To go back a step, like the recruiter that you're dealing with is a person and an individual, and they may be a nice person. They're probably a nice person, right? Nobody goes to work wanting to not be a nice person today. But depending on who they work for, some of the companies that those recruiters work for have this kind of, you have to get X number of interviews today, you have to get X number of CVs sent out today. And I think if somebody is working in that kind of environment, it's very difficult for them to focus on quality and doing a good job over just meeting their numbers. And if their activity for the day is driven by somebody else telling them they have to hit these certain numbers, then where does their interest lie? It's not in making a good situation for Joel or for any other client. It's in hitting those numbers, and it's the wrong way to focus on it. But, if that's the place they work and that's what it's like, then there's nothing they can do about that, right? Then to move that on to putting you in for an interview for something where they're pretty sure somebody else is going to get the job, then they may actually have just used you to get their interview numbers up so they hit their target for interview numbers. And so consequently, your time is a victim of someone else's bad process. And that's the kind of stuff that I've been on a bit of a one-woman crusade to get rid of.
I think this is exactly what I think is really helpful for us, is to have that insight of the other side and the other pressures that are coming into the equation, because I think it provides a useful context. So if I was to ask you then, what 3 things could candidates do, in your opinion, to raise their profile in the industry and help them get their next role?
Okay, probably none of that's related to recruiters, but one of the things that you can do, I have done several sessions on how to improve your career prospects. One of the things that you need to do is have a plan, right? Otherwise, you're jumping in the car and you've got a full tank of petrol and half a carton of cigarettes, and it's 500 miles to Chicago, and off we go, right? But you at least knew that you were heading for Chicago, okay? So, like, you know, if you don't have a plan, and you're not working on your own goals, then you're working on someone else's, which is fine if you're getting something out of it and you're getting the training you need and you're getting the money that you want to be able to do whatever it is that you want to do with your life goals. Or more power to you, absolutely no problem. But have a plan first. Understand the as is and to be of the situation. So here's where I am now. I'm a functional consultant, but I want to get into pre-sales. Because I like doing the new and next stuff and building interesting solutions, right? So, okay, what's my as is? This is what I do now. Which of those skills do I already have? Well, I understand how to put the solutions together. I understand how to customize the system, how to configure it, and I understand what can and can't be done out of the box, right? What do I need to know, right? And then you just make a list of all of the things you need to know to get you into that pre-sales role, and then, you know, that will help you along the way to take advantage of opportunities. So as things come up of like, oh, can you work on this project? And you might think, no, not really. Oh, but there's an opportunity for me to learn that on that project, which is something I need to get to here. So, you know, I don't want to spend forever doing the career planning stuff. But then to raise your visibility internally, right? Make it be known internally that you're looking to move up. Ask your manager what it is that you can do that can get you up to the next level, and then put a plan together. Again, do your as is and to be. What do you need to learn? And then put a plan together to get the training and development that you need and get yourself into that role. If that's not an option for you internally and you need to look externally, then great, make relationships with 1, 2, 3, however many really good recruiters you can find that are going to keep an eye out for things for you. And you can approach them from a perspective of saying, you know, I'm not necessarily in a hurry to move now, but if this kind of role comes in, then I would want to hear about it, right? Sure. And that's the same thing you can do for contracting. You don't have to be... The contracting thing is a bit difficult because you're usually so deep in the weeds of a project when you're working that you don't have time to search for something else, and then it ends. You may or may not want to take a couple of weeks off, but then you're back to square one and you're searching and you haven't got money coming in at that time, right? So if you're a contractor, my recommendation is a month or so. If you know that you're not getting extended, because one of the real bugbears is, well, can you find me a new role because I'm finishing at the end of the month. They find you something else, you go, no, I'm getting extended where I am and I'm going to stay here. Right? We'll still be friends afterwards, but it won't be my favourite. So, like, it's a really good thing, like a 6 weeks or 4 weeks before the end of your contract, update your CV, put that you're open to work on your LinkedIn profile, and you'll probably get more attention than you can handle. Put a note on there that says, I'm coming available on this date, so people can see when you're coming available, so somebody's not going to call you with a contract that has to start tomorrow, and if you can't do that, then there's no point in wasting each other's time, right? Start reaching out to the recruiters that you know, or send them a copy of your CV and say, like, don't send it anywhere because I'm still working on this, but this is the kind of contract I'm looking for. These are the things that I like. And then people have a tendency to try and be less prescriptive or explicit with what they want because they think they'll catch a bit of everything. Right. Honestly, it's better off to say, this is what I'm really good at. I want to do this. Projects have any kind of element of this in, then just give me a ring about. If you're not sure, ring me. It'll be a 5-minute conversation to decide whether it's right or not. Okay. And that will allow the recruiter to have enough information on you to know whether or not he can give you a call about stuff that's coming in across his desk. Does that make sense? Yeah,
that's really good. I think that's really helpful, actually. It kind of goes to something that we're speaking a little bit about today in a minute, about even as a contractor, building a team for yourself. That if you were working on a permanent opportunity, you would have people who would be looking after your personal development, your career progression. But actually, as a contractor, we need to do that for ourselves. So we have this opportunity by building good relationships with people like yourself to tap into the knowledge and experience that comes with that, and almost have our team around us. You know, I know for myself, I've got relationships with yourself and probably 3 others who, if I'm coming up to the end of a contract, I'll give them a call and say, I'm coming up, I'm just letting you know I'm coming on the market, and I would rather be placed by yourselves. Now, that's not to say you don't use anyone else, but at least you'll get an honest and accurate state of the market. You'll get honest feedback as to where you are, that sort of thing. Does that make sense to you then?
It makes total sense as well, and you can absolutely keep it to like a handful of people you trust and know that you have that team in there, but don't exclude everybody else either. You know, maybe as it gets nearer your end date, if you haven't had anything that looks tasty coming in, maybe you cast the net wider, you know, 3 weeks or 2 weeks towards the end. You send your CV out to people that maybe you don't know that well or that you haven't worked with before and say, look, you know, I'm coming to an end. If you've got anything, let me know. This is what I'm looking for. This is the rate that I want, you know. And also you can say, I think people are really nervous with recruiters to say, like, you know, I want, let's say, just for the sake of argument, you typically want 500 a day. But you would actually look at something if it was all working remote and it was an easy-ish job, you would probably look at it if it was 450, right? Let's just say for the sake of argument. But people don't want to say I'll work for 450 because they think the recruiter is only ever going to pay them 450.
Sure.
And certainly in some cases that's going to be true, right? But with the people that you work with, just tell them what the parameters are, because you want them to give you a call about, like, if I know that you won't work below 450, I'm not going to call you with something that's 400 unless it was so good that there was something so amazing in it that I thought, like, do you know what, he's still going to want to know about it, I would probably call you anyway. But like, you know, if you give people as much information about what does and doesn't work for you, then they know, right? And if they don't get anything for you, they don't get anything for you, but you shared the information with them and then it's on them.
We're all just doing our best, aren't we, at the end of the day? And the more we can work together and benefit each other, and that's one thing that I've always enjoyed working with Maximus, is that with yourself and the others who've been there, that there is that real collaborative approach, and even things like, you know, you guys asking me or others in the Dynamics community, you know, what does this mean? How can I best ask the right questions of the client to make sure I'm placing you correctly? I think that sharing of knowledge is really important. So that's been really good. So thank you very much for giving up your time.
I loved it. We could do this all day, couldn't we?
We could. We should start a mini vlog series.
Well, I'm going to pose the question now. You know, is the Mulligan and Abbott podcast?
I think so. Watch this space. It's amazing. Thank you, Alison.
Thanks, Joel.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
And there you go. So, wasn't that brilliant? Some fantastic points made by Alison there, which we're going to incorporate into our review at the end. But lots of really good stuff about being open about your situation as a candidate, building a team, but not just limiting yourself to only a few recruiters. Some fantastic insights from a very experienced member of the community. Okay, now I also wanted to chat to someone else who is Steve Styles. Now, I don't know if you've come across Steve before. You may have come across his brother, John Styles, who I believe is on with us today. But Steve works for Nigel Frank. Now, no booze, digital or otherwise. I'm sure it's fair to say, and Steve knows that I'm saying this, that we've all had positive and negative experiences with Nigel Frank in the past as an organisation. But I learned some really valuable lessons working with Steve, actually, particularly around how, as a candidate, how I interact with organisations and individuals at those organisations. And Steve's been a great example for me, and a great example of what we're talking about today, of how building that relationship can be really key. So what we're going to do is we're just going to play the chat I had with Steve. Bear with me. Okay, here we go. Okay, so now we're talking to Steve Styles from Nigel Frank. Steve, tell us a little bit about yourself, mate. And Cilla Blackstyle, as I said to Alison, tell me about yourself. Who are you and where do you come from?
Yeah, so I've been in recruitment for almost 3 years now. I do similar sort of stuff to you, mate. So Dynamics 365 CE or CRM contract roles in the UK. Yeah, that's it really.
Cool, amazing, fantastic. Now, you work for Nigel Frank, who, if we're being honest, haven't had the greatest reputation in the industry as an organisation. And I know I've not had perfect experiences, that's putting it kindly, I think we could all admit that. And I know I've spoken to a couple of people from Nigel Frank who that history is kind of accepted, I think, a little bit. But one of the points I wanted to talk about yourself, we started working together about 6 months ago-ish. You reached out to me on LinkedIn, and if I'm being honest, I responded to you in a way that was reflective of my past experiences. So you reached out and said, can we have a chat? And I said, no chance, mate. I don't deal with Nigel Frank. Because what I'd done is I'd made the decision not to deal with Nigel Frank based on my experiences with one or two individuals there. And really, in terms of what we're talking about here, in terms of this session, is really focusing on collaborating with individuals as opposed to getting hung up on organisations. And I know Nigel Frank have made a lot of changes, but that's what has struck me over the last 6 months is my working relationship with you has now meant that you are one of my trusted team, if you like, of recruiters that I would go to and reach out to. So I guess from your perspective, why would you say that the relationship between a candidate and recruiter is so important?
I think there's a lot of reasons for both sides, to be honest. The thing for a lot of recruiters to remember is you're not dealing with a commodity, you're dealing with a person at the end of the day. Because there's a shelf life to recruiters, and it's kind of, I think if I'm getting my figures right, it's a year or a year and a half on average.
Wow.
And I think people have too short term of a view, try and cut corners, and as a result of that, you start treating the other person like a commodity. So that's probably the first thing I would say. I think it's a bit of a fact, especially in the industry we work in, that agents are either, how you see it, a necessary evil or a necessity, because there's a fluctuating demand, but there's always a low supply, especially in the sort of higher skilled range. So I'd say that's why it's important for a candidate to build a relationship with one or a few, specialist recruiters that you can trust and you think have the knowledge to place you in the right role. I think another sort of value add from a relationship with a recruiter would be that we're in a position where we're quite tapped in to the market, especially if we've been in it for a while. So we can give you updates on the market. If you're sitting in a position and are considering a move, we can help make that decision easier for you. Or if you've been on the job market for a while and you're struggling, just providing that bit of human reassurance, I think, is also important and can go a long way. I think for recruiters as well, though, relationships are important because, like with yourself, for example, mate, we don't just catch up about jobs. We talk about the market, we talk about tech trends and industry trends, and that's where we get a lot of our information from. We can study for certifications and stuff, but when it comes to the marketing module being really prevalent and adopted, we won't learn that unless we speak to you guys. And that in turn helps us have more educated conversations with our clients, and it makes us sound more knowledgeable, and in turn get access to vacancies, place you in the vacancy. So it's a whole cycle.
I think that's a really interesting point actually, make there, mate, because if I'm being totally honest, I've always been very nervous of the question, how's the market for you? Because in my experience, and this isn't a Nigel Frank thing, this is an industry thing, we've all had the conversation, so hiya, you okay? Yeah, fine. How's the market? Yeah, it's okay. You got any opportunities on? And you say, well, one or two at the minute. Oh, who are they with? And then all of a sudden the person goes, okay, see you later. And you sort of think, oh, why did they bring me? You know, and you realise basically all they're doing is scouting for opportunities to bring people get names. I think my conversations with you about this have been very different.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know, for example, you know, you've asked me the question, have you got many opportunities on at the minute? And I've said yes. But you've never asked me for names. You've never asked me to reveal rates or anything like that. And you've asked me how's the market at the minute. But that's been a genuine conversation as part of a bigger thing as to what you're trying to do with me as well. So it's taught me, if I'm being honest, I've kind of learnt that question isn't a bad question. And like you've just said, that actually we need to see that as helping you represent us better. Does that resonate a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say as well. Because if I have 10 conversations with 10 different people and they're all giving me their analysis of the market and they're all in different roles as well, I can use that cumulative information to then present it to a client and give them an accurate overview of the market as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what that helps with as well is, I know there's been a couple of times where you've put something up on LinkedIn and I've messaged and said, do you think this role would be right for me, mate? And you've told me no, because of X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
And I've been in a position with other recruiters in the past where basically they'll just put you forward for anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not massively helpful, actually. You can have that overload of your name in the industry. So I think that selective thing is important.
Yeah, I'd argue that's another kind of benefit of a relationship as well, because the more I talk to you, the more I'll get to know your strengths, your core skill set, and your preferences. You've got particular preferences when looking for a role that are different to other people. So then the more we speak, the more I'm in a position to say, actually, no, that's not right for you, mate. That would be right for someone else. But alternatively, as soon as I get a role in, I'm thinking, oh, Joel would be great for that.
Yeah. It's interesting, actually, on that topic. Alison made a point which I never thought of, which is that as a recruiter, maybe not so much in the dynamics industry, but let's say you get a BA role, which you're going to get not just dynamics BAs, but BAs across the board applying for.
Yeah.
Well, you could have 200, 300 applicants or people contact you on LinkedIn, etc. If I'm not in your mind, if that was a role I was going to go for, then it's actually reasonable to say you're probably not going to think of me, because you've got all these people, let alone the people you're thinking of. So I guess, how much part does the relationship play in keeping you in someone like yourself's mind for when roles come up?
It does play a part, admittedly, because it's clear that we can't talk to everyone and we can't form a relationship with everyone, which is why when a job comes through, I will always post it up on LinkedIn. And the odd person who might sort of get in touch with me that I perhaps either didn't think of or didn't even know might be the best person for the role. So, but yeah, I mean, in answer to your question, it is important. And that's why I kind of say to candidates like yourself, don't just pigeonhole yourself in having a relationship with just one recruiter, because as good as that can be for the relationship, you're not exposing yourself to every role that's out there in the market. So it's good to have a few trusted ones. And then you might get the odd sort of recruiter you've not spoken to before or not heard of has a role because they're on a preferred supplier list. And they might be the ones that are more susceptible to ghosting you or not getting back to you because you've not. And that's, you've kind of got to play the game, in my opinion. But as long as you've got the few trusted ones, then you're in a good spot. I think probably the most important thing, if we're thinking in the context of people's perceptions of not just how Nigel Frank may have used to have been, but other agencies and what you associate with a bad recruiter. I think the way to get around that, or the most important thing to bear in mind, is from a recruiter's perspective, we need to respect the privacy of our candidates. And from a candidate's perspective, candidates need to respect the confidentiality of recruiters. So like you were saying earlier on, I've never asked you for any information about the roles you've been going for, because I wouldn't want to meddle in any processes that you've got, because I mean, how's that gonna work for our relationship? But likewise, if I'm running a role past you and I've got it on an exclusive basis with my client, let's be honest, I want obviously to remain exclusive on that business, and it's easy to do that without prying eyes from other recruitment agencies. So it helps me out if you keep the information about the role we're going for confidential as well.
Yeah, and it's something we've talked about a little bit today, and we're going to talk about a bit more after this, but is that concept of building your own team. So, you know, if you place me in a permanent organisation, I'd have people around me who are helping me with my development, career progression, all these different things. But as contracts, we don't really do that for ourselves. It's us, and we move from contract to contract to contract. So I think having people like yourself and maybe 3 or 4 recruiters you trust can be a big help with that. So, I mean, on the subject of that relationships, then what can, let's take it one at a time. What can candidates do to build that relationship, to build good, solid relationships with recruiters that are out there?
To be honest, I think it's all pretty basic stuff. Obviously I'll try and treat you as a person rather than a commodity, and we obviously appreciate the same as humans. So a case of not ghosting us, like you say, even if you can't pick up the phone, you know, calling back or messaging as to why that may be and trying to sort out a different time, just because you will appreciate, or people appreciate, recruiters getting back to them or taking their calls and stuff. So obviously it's the same for us. And it's all around adding value as well from both sides. I think as much as, you know, we enjoy a chat, I need to add value in our calls. I need to let you know I'm working for you, or let you know how the market's looking, and vice versa. Like it's something we appreciate a little bit of market information, information about trends, and just the same. So it's that reciprocal element that we look for.
Yeah, that sort of resonates a lot with my experience as well. So I think just treating people like a human being, not a commodity, I think that works both ways. You make a really good point there. I think, if I'm being honest, have I been guilty of that in the past? Perhaps, yeah, probably. Of thinking, oh, recruiter chasing me, I'm busy, I won't call them back. Well, but then what happens is, as we've said already today, that when I'm finished a contract, I'll take any call anytime. So you can't have it both ways, really, if you want that relationship. So no, that's really good, mate. Thank you. And what about recruiters then? What would you say recruiters could do to help build those connections? Because obviously not everyone's the same. But what have you found works? What would you recommend?
Building upon what I've just said, because that's probably the paramount thing. I think it helps to know your market and to know your technology and add value that way, because when you're starting out, you're not going to know any of that. And we're very fortunate that a lot of candidates in our market will sit and have a chat with us and tell us about the technology and the market and everything. But to continue building a relationship, it's about the value add again. You need to know your stuff. You need to be in a position to educate these candidates, because in a sea of recruiters, I think it helps to shine through as a consultant in the truest sense of the word, and know your stuff and make an effort to know your stuff.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a really interesting point, actually, because ultimately, right, you know, you're not a dynamics person. You know, you're a recruiter. That's your job. I think there can be an expectation on you to know everything about dynamics in the Power Platform, like I do, like people like myself do. And ultimately, that's not your job. But like you've said, going that bit of an extra mile, trying to gain some understanding. And again, maybe that's something candidates could do to help, is give you a little bit of time so that you feel, if you come across a term or a technology that you don't really totally understand, that you've got certain candidates you could ring up and say, what's that, mate? Just so I know for the future. Is that something that you think would be useful?
Yeah, I've done that a few times with a few people, to be fair. Most of it is through conversations you have about roles, and if you're recruiting for a role and you'll run a spec past someone and you say, look, I'm a bit new to this concept, this is my understanding of it, can you fill in any gaps? But yeah, I would agree with that.
Excellent. That's really good, mate. Fantastic. Now, it's worth saying, none of the organisations that we've talked to today, Alison, Maximus, or Steve here at Nigel Frank, they've had no say other than to give permission for the people to come on here. So we really appreciate that. I think I would say just personally, both with Alison, but with Steve as well, I would personally recommend Steve as a good person. Reach out to him if you're looking for a contract. Thanks, Steve, for your time, mate. Really appreciate you coming on and adding into this.
Thank you very much for having me, mate. Appreciate that.
Nice. Okay, so some excellent input by Steve there. Lots of really good, useful points that we can use. So, what are the keys then that we can take away from this? Well, there's 4 keys to this collaborative dynamic that we want to have. First of all, remember your shared aim. Recruiter, consultant, candidate, whatever role you want to say you are, at the end of the day, we're all wanting the same thing, wanting to achieve the same thing, to put the candidate in a role. Everybody gets paid, happy day. So having that as your method of thinking, your way of thinking, your mindset is really useful. Second, build a relationship with people, not a company. Now, that's not saying all recruitment companies are bad, nor is it saying all recruitment companies are great. But I guess the lesson I learnt with Steve is that if you've had a bad experience in the past, don't let that define whether you'll deal with an individual or an organisation in the now. So building those relationships with individuals is really useful. Being open, be honest about your situation. Don't tell someone you're available for a role if you're not. By the same token, don't tell someone a role is red hot if it's not, and you're just wanting a speculative inquiry. And finally, build your team. Pick 3 or 4 good people and build relationships with them. Now, that is not done the day before you leave your last contract. That is down to hard work and effort that is put into it in the weeks and months way before that even comes up, because they know the recruiters can take time to get to know you, and indeed you can take the time to get to know the recruiters you're working with. So pick a team, pick a bunch of people, maybe 3 or 4, and start, but reach out to them, build relationships with them. Now, who are you going to start with? Well, I thought I'd share with you what I like to call Team Abbott. It's not quite the Avengers, but it's getting there. It's close enough. So obviously you've got Alison. I'm going to get such pelters for this. You got Alison there and Steve, but also they're in the chat. So again, they're going to give me loads of abuse in a minute. But we got Alex and Rob from Nexus. Now, my personal experience with Alex and Rob is that they'll check in with me periodically, whether they've got a role or not, and they'll be open about that. But also I'm able to touch base with them and they'll give me honest feedback on whether a role might be right for me or not, even if it's not a role that they've got. So there you go. As a starting point, if you don't have a team yet, if you don't have a bunch of people to reach out to, there you go. You've got the LinkedIn QR codes for the profiles. I'm going to post that on my LinkedIn profile later on this evening. So I would strongly recommend that you reach out to and connect with these guys. Okay, so I'm a minute over my 50 minutes, but has anyone got any questions? I'm going to go with no one's typing in the chat, so that's a no. So we do have a question session next at 4:30 in the main room, obviously. Yeah, but as we said earlier, if you want to reach out to me on the socials, please do, especially on LinkedIn. Connect with me and I'll be happy to help. Okay. Oh, where can we get the recording? Asks Mr. Mark Williams. I'm going to stick my neck out and say...
Well, I can pick that up for you, Joel.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah, in the next 2 or 3 days, we'll be uploading them to the D365 UK YouTube channel. So they'll all be there. And you can find all the videos from our previous meetings as well there.
Amazing. So thank you to all you people who've sacrificed the Chris Huntingford session to be with me today. And believe me when I say I'm going to be going and watching the Chris Huntingford session as well. So yes, that's really handy. And thank you to the organisers as well, Feridun, and that you
Yes, absolutely.
really
Joe.
appreciate that, mate, because it's a great opportunity for us here. You guys don't get paid for this, so we appreciate your hard work.
Thank you very much. That was a fascinating session. Lots of interesting discussions from your colleague speakers as well. So yes, our next thing is as a general free-for-all, come along, ask anything you like, preferably to do with Dynamics or Power Platform. And so I'll stop the recording here. And please rejoin the meeting that you came in at the beginning of the day.